Out of all the ideas and theories that I've shared in my article writing about knowledge management over the last almost 2 years now, minimal note-taking has come out on top as the most popular and perhaps the most resonant idea out of everything that I've shared. So in honour of my first YouTube video, I thought I'd tell you everything there is to know about minimal note-taking. We'll cover its definition, we'll cover what taking notes minimally actually means and what it looks like, and I'll give you some examples from my own Obsidian Vault. And then afterwards, after I've shown you these examples, we'll discuss how to actually improve at taking notes minimally, and a couple of interventions I actually use in my own processes to make sure that I'm not getting carried away with things. So first of all, the definition. What actually is minimal note-taking? And since I started writing about it, I've defined it as producing the desired quality and quantity of work output with as simple a system as is possible to let you do so. And I always picture minimal note-taking on this kind of continuum. So you have a note-taking system, it's either simple or complex, and there's such thing as it being too simple in that you're just doing everything manually, you're not making use of perhaps the note-taking app's features or plugins or extensions or that kind of thing. And on the other end of the continuum, there is being too maximalist, like having all of the plugins and features used and everything installed to the extent that rather than not having enough power, you've got too much power and complexity, and it's taking away from the attention that you want to be putting into actually creating your desired quality and quantity of output. And taking notes minimally is striking the right balance between those two things. So having a system that's simple enough that you don't get overrun by all of the complicated features, but that's powerful enough to actually be a bicycle for your creative work, rather than something that's just too simple and doesn't really help you cut corners where it's needed. So how does minimal note-taking actually manifest itself in the use of your knowledge management system and the work that you do? Mostly this is making decisions about adjusting your system to change where you sit on the simplicity and complexity spectrum, and deciding whether to add new features, whether to take things away. I mean, it's a question of choosing things to take away, because sometimes you don't want to over-optimize, sometimes you just want to put your head down and work and type things out and get the work done, get things completed. But sometimes it's a question of adding a touch of complexity that will bring an overwhelming benefit to the process of your work, and doing so moving a little bit in the direction of more complexity, but to help you with overwhelming benefit to your quality and quantity of output is something that's actually recommended, because it helps the quality and quantity of output. I mean, that's pretty self-explanatory, but making the adjustments to where your system and the way you work lies on that continuum is seeing minimal note-taking as a principle in action. In summary, the way I like to define it comes in fact from Cal Newport's book Digital Minimalism, in which he uses this line to refer to allowing technology into your life, but in my context I use it in allowing complexity into your note-taking system. You only add something into your system if it's going to provide an overwhelming benefit to the way you work. And likewise, Cal Newport's reference for this is you only use certain technology if it's going to overwhelmingly enhance the quality of your life. And so now that I've cleared this up, I'm going to take you into my own Obsidian Vault and show you a couple of changes that I've made that have actually stuck around as overwhelmingly beneficial to my workflow, and I'm going to explain why they have done so and how I've gone about deciding to make these changes, just so you can see an example. And then after that, I'll go into a little bit more about how you get better at choosing what to do and what to change, and when to know whether to make these changes, or when to know whether your mind's just playing tricks on you and you should just put your head down and get some work done. So I'm going to take you over into my Obsidian Vault now. So here we are in Obsidian, and this is my own personal vault that I do all of my work in. So you're getting quite an intimate insight into the way I do my own work, which is the way I want things to be, because this is the system that I can speak the most truthfully about. This is the system that I'm most intimately used to using. So, I mean, it's the best way forward, and it's how I wanted to show you and demonstrate these things. And so, minimal note taking, making a decision about adding a feature that's going to add a little bit of complexity but going to have an overwhelming benefit on your work. And now there's a plugin in Obsidian called QuickAd, and I'm not going to go too much into depth about how to actually use the plugin, but just know that how it functions is you can set up little automations in the plugin that allow you to kind of skip manual repetitive tasks, and something like that would be extremely useful in terms of saving time when you're someone who takes a lot of different sorts of notes but wants to have consistent metadata across all the notes, which allows you to search for them, sort them, organize them in an effective way that allows you to recall these notes and find them and use them again in the future. And so I'm going to show you an example here of in my own vault. So we have this content folder which just has lists and links to all of the different pieces of content that I want to publish and create in the future. And if I were to manually create a new note about a new piece of content that I wanted to create, I'd have to create a new note, call it new piece of content about note taking and PKM, and then I'd have to add all the metadata in manually, so tags, category, articles, and then of course when you're doing this it's long-winded, that you've got room to mess up and do things incorrectly. It's going to be, if you do it over a long period of time, it's going to be really inconsistent. And so I thought, what's going to make things easier is to actually add a little bit of complexity to my vault in the form of the QuickAd plugin. And it provides an overwhelming benefit through what I'm going to show you right now. So with QuickAd, just know you can set up these configurations behind the scenes, and I might make a video on doing such a thing in the future, but you use templates and you outline which folder you want certain configurations to be saved in. But just know that now creating a note similar to the one that I just did manually is as easy for me as pressing a shortcut, clicking new article, and then new article about note taking and PKM, and I click enter, and there I have an article template with the correct metadata saved in the right folder that I need, so I can just go straight into writing the outline of the piece. And for something that looks relatively simple there, it saves so much time when you do so many different types of notes. I mean, you saw how many configurations that I had just here: quick notes, parasitical newsletter, articles. Just having everything set up and optimized like that, it took a little bit to actually add that optimization into the vault. But once it's done, and once you've kind of climbed over the hump of actually having set that thing up, it saves so much time, and increasingly more time the more different notes you start creating, and the more complex the nature of your system is, and the more you start to work in it. And so that is a change that adds complexity to my vault, but undoubtedly provides a massive benefit to the way I work. And therefore that's an example of following the principles of minimal note taking, because it makes it significantly easier to produce the quality and quantity of output that you desire, even if it does add a little bit of complexity. It's a trade-off between complexity and ease of getting to the end result, which is perhaps your work or your content or anything else that you might want to be making. So there's one more example that I wanted to show here. So back when I was simply using a 4-folder Vault setup, by the way, I'm working in a system that I call Parazettle, which is kind of a fusion between Tiago Forte's Para method and Nicholas Luhmann's Zettelkasten. It's something that I developed over the last few years that I've spent taking notes in Obsidian to be a fusion of the two systems that works together fantastically well in my head to help dictate the way that I organise information and work with it. So if you want to learn a little bit more about that system, check out the top link in the description where I've got a free introduction to the system that you can sign up for and learn a little bit more of the context behind how and when and why I developed it. So if you want to check that out, first link in the description. Back to what I was saying, initially I used to have just projects, areas, resources, archive, which is Tiago Forte's Para method. But what I noticed with this, the problem that I had with this, was that you had to immediately choose where to position your different notes and your different bits of information. So I wanted almost a catch-all that could help to simplify the catching of ideas and information and all the different types of material that you might get inside your note-taking system. So I created this 5th folder called Inbox, where I have now set up another QuickAd shortcut like before to just quickly make an arbitrary note with a date string as the title, or where I can write what I want. And there's no limit to the type of information that I write in these notes. It's just simply a quick capture mechanism that I will then be able to find later in the inbox. So if I close that file up there, I can open it again, see it's quick access to all of the captured information and files that I haven't yet to organize, and then at a later point I can organize through it all and put it in all the correct folders, whether it's resource, project note, part of the areas folder. But just to have that interim step between coming up with the information and the content or any other idea that I want to capture and then actually having it in the right space inside my vault is a little extra step, addition of complexity, but it subtracts complexity in that I don't have to initially think about where the information is going to go, which might add friction to the actual capturing of information in the first place. And that's something you don't want to do, because all the ideas that come to you are special and should be looked after and nurtured so that you might be able to act on them in the future. And so that again is, yes, it's a little bit more complexity as it comes to the technical side of your vault, like setting up the shortcuts and just having a little extra folder, but it saves so much friction in getting your thoughts from your head and actually into your vault. So that is another example of minimal note taking, in that I've got an overwhelming benefit from adding a little bit of complexity into the folder, into the vault, and it really improves my workflow and the way that I work. Now what I want to touch on is how you actually get better at spotting these changes in your vault that you might want to make and implementing them without them detracting from the time spent on your work and your projects, how to actually make the correct decisions about these changes. It's a simple answer, it's a simple response really. It's that it's an iterative process, and you're not going to be brilliant at spotting these changes and improvements and actually selecting the right ones to make to start with. It's going to be something that you have to work upon, and the one most important thing that you need to be able to start this process of iteration is to actually be clear on your goals and your output and what you want to be using your note-taking and knowledge management system for. Because if you don't have that outlined, Similar to me back when I very first started using Obsidian, just out of curiosity and just wanting to tap around with the note-taking system. I never made any progress back then because I had no clear goal for what I wanted to use the app for. But once you have goals and projects and things that you want to work on to actually further your life, better your life, it's much easier to note whether a change you're making to the system is actually going to be useful, because you just measure how much better the system becomes at taking you towards this goal and making progress. And that is simply the way to actually have a reliable kind of measuring stick to measure the effect of these decisions on your note taking. So I'll go back to the fact that it's an iterative process, and you're going to have to choose to make a few changes here and there, and you just measure the progress on your goals and how much better or worse the system becomes at helping you towards these goals. And then through just getting the positive or negative data points from this outcome and this progress, you know whether the change you've made has actually balanced you into a better spot on the simplicity complexity spectrum, or whether it's actually moved away from the point that you need to be. And you're not going to get this right every time. There are going to be changes that you make to your vault that you're going to have to take away in the future. But it is an iterative process, and over time, as you make more of these decisions and you get more used to working towards goals in your note-taking system, the better you get. And there's one more point that I want to make about these decisions and these changes in your note-taking system, and that's kind of surrounding the fact that your brain will often, if you're doing a difficult task, your brain will invent problems for you to solve, and often this means coming up with random inconsequential things on the spot about how you can make this change in your vault here and that would improve that. And more often than not, what that is your brain just trying to distract you from doing the hard work at hand. So if you get an idea for a change you want to make, the best protocol to have is to set that idea aside a little bit. Perhaps you've got an inbox folder in your vault like me, so put a note in there about a change you want to make, and then come back to it at a later date. And if that change still seems attractive, still seems like it's going to improve or it's going to be beneficial to the way you manage knowledge, then you can actually try it out and then go through that process of seeing whether it actually makes work easier or whether it detracts from that, and then iterating again to make your system more and more useful. You can go about that process if that idea still seems attractive, but more often than not, it's just your brain kind of trying to drag threads of your attention away from doing the difficult work at hand. I mean, what's going to improve your chances of progress? Is it writing out a video outline, or even stepping away from the note-taking system entirely and like putting the camera up there if you're someone who makes videos, or getting onto the internet and actually publishing the writing you've been working on? That's going to get you closer to your goals than actually just taking your attention away from work at hand and instead thinking about changes and optimizations you can make to your vault. So oftentimes with those kinds of things, it's your brain distracting you. So take a note of the change that you think you want to make, give it a little bit of a cool down period, and if when you come back to that note or that idea it still seems attractive, then go for it, put it in place. I mean, you'll know better than me whether it's something that it's really going to benefit your system, but don't bullshit yourself and just start tinkering around with things because you're too tired to actually make progress on the work and the goals you want to achieve. So that is minimal note taking, and it's a simple principle. In reality, it's simplicity, complexity, and finding the right balance in between there that helps you do the desired output of quality and quantity in as simple a system as possible. So that's it pretty much for my first ever YouTube video. And if you made it this far into the video, thank you very much for watching. Leave a comment below about what you think I can make better for the next videos, and also mention if there are any other topics or things that you want to see me cover, because this is something that I'm going to be pouring a lot more time and effort into now. I mean, I've written hundreds of articles on Obsidian on the internet now, and they're good and they still provide a load of value, and they're still kind of the genesis of me working with a lot of these ideas about knowledge management and note-taking, and it's where I find it easiest to figure out my own thoughts on things. But just the fact that I can put a camera in front of me and talk to people and take them into my own vault and show them exactly what's happening is such an advantage of video and YouTube that I cannot afford to really miss out on. So it's something that I'm going to be doing more of going into the future. And last thing, I mentioned the system that I work in called Parazettal is something that is very much the best system I've found, and I've tried a lot of them, I've worked on a lot of them. It's something that I've gone through that iterative process of minimal note-taking in for the last 3 years to come up with. It's a fusion of Tiago Forte's Para method, which is one of the most popular in the last few years note-taking organisation systems, and Nicholas Luhmann's Zettelkasten, which is an absolute stalwart of creative note-taking and idea wrangling, and I've managed to fuse them both together into a single vault. So if you want to learn more about the origin of that and the details, there is a free course for you to check out in the top link in the description. But aside from that, that's been me. Thank you very much for watching, and I will catch you in the next video.